All right. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 2023 Psychedelic Missouri Freedom Conference. And my name is Mike Hagan. It is an honor and a pleasure to speak with you all, if from afar, uh, at yet another Psychedelic Missouri event. And thank you so much to the people who make that happen. The progress that we've made over the last few years is remarkable. My good friend Epan Thampi, wherever you are, you're amazing. Thank you. If you don't know Epan, put that on your list. And thanks to all of you for attending the conference, all of you here, and for the support. There is an impressive list of speakers who will be sharing stuff with you throughout the day. I'm not sure when this particular piece that we're producing now is going to be presented, but at any rate, there's going to be tons of information. I hope you have your brains ready, and it's going to be a great day. So, all right, I was hoping to be there in St. Louis and in Kansas City with y'all, but as the universe would have it, didn't work out that way. So I'm coming to you digitally this year, but not without good medicine. And with that in mind, I'd like y'all to please welcome Dr. Dennis Mckenna. For a crowd like this, he needs a little introduction, but Dennis is a world-renowned ethnobotanist. He is an author and now the host of a new podcast. He's an expert on psychedelic plants and medicine. He's been an inspiration for me for many, many years, a great teacher and a friend, and it's great to see him. Dennis, hi.
Nice to see you again, Mike. Always good to be back.
I thought, what's the best thing I can do to bring some value to this conference if I'm going to be in absentia? And very shortly, the answer came, hey, see if you can get Dr. Dennis to spend a few minutes and bring him to the show. So thank you very much. I know you're doing it on short notice. I know how busy you are, and it means a lot to me. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. So, hey, Dennis, I also know that you presented at the big the MASS conference in Denver earlier this year, and I heard through the Vine that you actually spoke of or mentioned the Missouri Botanical Garden in St. Louis. So I figure maybe that's a good place for us to start.
That's a good place for us to start. Yeah, the Missouri Botanical Garden is one of the things that Missouri can really be proud of, because they have such a deep program in tropical botany, particularly in South America. And interestingly that you mentioned that, because they have online, most of their collections are online, and it's called Tropicos. I think it's tropicos.org.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go in there and search all the collections, most of them been imaged and digitized, and it's an incredible resource. I don't know much about Missouri, frankly. My initial, I sort of take a dim view of it. I mean, I think of Missouri, it's all a bunch of Trumpers and, right-wing people, but there are some good people. You're one of them. But the Missouri Botanical Garden is a wonderful place. And personally, it has a deep connection for me because there was a famous botanist at the Missouri Botanical Garden named Al Gentry, who he was probably the world's foremost neotropical botanist.
Really?
He collected for the Missouri Botanical Garden, and he collected a lot. He worked a lot out of Iquitos, which is this herbarium at the university there that I'm trying to raise $10 million to renovate, to basically
that's one of your favorite places. Yes.
Yeah. And they even have a salon named after him. And so many of the collections at UNAT, the Universidad Nacional Amazonina de la Peruana, are also duplicated at Missouri. So Missouri, everybody calls it MOBOT. the collections at Mobot are much more comprehensive than, the collections in Iquitos, and the collections in Iquitos are a mess. Most of them haven't even been, actually unpacked from their collection bags or whatever and brought cataloged into the herbarium. That's not the case with Mobot. Every collection at UNAP, you can find a duplicate at Mobot if you search it.
Okay. Wow.
So this is partly the task, that we want to do. We want to assimilate the rest of the collections. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, Al Gentry was killed in a plane crash in 1992. About that, thereabouts. He and another famous field scientist and ornithologist, I think his name was Ted Baker. I'm not sure of his last name, but they were doing aerial treetop surveys in a light plane in Ecuador.
Mm-hmm.
And in part, they felt like they had to do these treetop surveys, species surveys, because the whole ecosystem was collapsing so fast. That was the only way to do it. And they went down, and there were later reports. I mean, it was not good. It was not good that they went down. They were not killed immediately. They were like hung up in the canopy for days, slowly dying.
Yeah.
And then finally somebody found the plane, and so it's a tremendous loss to science, to the science of botany. Al Gentry, and I don't know if you ever met him. Did you? He was an incredible.
That's the first I've heard his name.
What's that?
That's the first I've heard his name.
Alwyn Gentry was his name, Al Gentry. And as a collector, he probably collected half the specimens in UNEP. He probably collected, in the course of his career, he didn't only work out of UNEP, he worked out of Ecuador and other institutions in Peru and Ecuador. He probably collected 100,000 specimens in his day.
Wow.
When I was doing my field work down there in 1981 out of Iquitos, and I was a graduate student, just getting my feet wet, kind of literally not really knowing what I was doing, but he and some of his students came through, and they went out. I went out on a collecting expedition with them for a day, and Al, he was like a maniac. I mean, he was incredible. He was raving through the jungle, and he was just grabbing plants, all over the place and stuffing them into bags. He didn't care what they were, anything like that. It all happened when he got back to the herbarium. Then they take these things out and sort them out. But that's how he was able to collect 100,000 specimens. Not only did he have graduate students who were as fanatic as he was, but he was like kamikaze plant collecting. It was insane. I was so blown away by the way he did it. And he was just a great guy.
Well,
wonderful fellow.
I'm thrilled that he leaves a little bit of his legacy here in Missouri at the Botanical Garden. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So they need people like that, and the people at UNAP, at this UNAP herbarium, the person I've worked with for over 50 years. Well, he's now the curator of the herbarium, but he was a graduate student when I first went there.
I see.
And his name is Juan Ruiz, and he's another one of these guys that he just has vast knowledge about plants, and he's one of these people about whom they sometimes say when a medicine man dies, it's as though a library has burned down. Well, he wasn't exactly a medicine man. He was a botanist, but he had he had one foot in science and one foot in traditional medicine.
I love it.
He is that library.
Mm.
And a lot of because he never writes anything down, uh, so a lot of what our project is, which is called Biognosis, people can
Yeah.
find out more about it at the McKenna Academy. But the a big objective of that process is to record one's knowledge, to basically, because now he's a little younger than me, and not that young, and the stuff he knows is going to get lost if we don't try to preserve it. So we're trying to preserve the plants, one's knowledge, the culture, the cultural knowledge about plants, all of this stuff, and the plants themselves. The biodiversity is very much threatened in the Amazon. The whole situation is not good. And so we're trying to do what we can to slow that down. Anyway, I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but
we're here to talk about all of it, and it's a big part of it, and your larger view on things is something I was going to ask about along the way anyway. I mean, it's important. We've got a local regional thing happening here in Missouri, and I'm proud to be a part of what the people are doing here, and they're trying hard against. Your impressions aren't all that wrong. It's an uphill battle in a place like Missouri for this type of thing. Although we did pass a reasonably sensible cannabis act in the last couple of years, and we're hoping to follow that up. Dennis, I'll mention really quickly. I was going to ask you if you've seen anything like this out and about as well. But one of the driving forces here in Missouri have been veterans groups. And I'm telling you, some of these men and women have really embraced psychedelic medicine, and they are courageous, and they are they have tenacity that's remarkable, and they are not afraid to sit in front of state representatives or whoever it might be. And they are really a force here in Missouri. And I just want to say hello. There's a few of those groups here today. Humble Warrior and Grunt Style, just a tip of the hat to all of y'all. And Veterans Health Leadership Coalition, you too. I think Warrior Angels is here today as well. So anyway, are you seeing that anywhere else, Dennis? Because it's made a huge impact in the veterans community around here.
Excuse me, could you repeat that last part?
I'm wondering if you've seen any evidence of veterans communities getting involved in psychedelic medicine elsewhere. It's a big driver here in Missouri. I'm wondering if you've seen that.
Well, yes, yeah, it's breaking out all over. I mean, these places are popping up like mushrooms, and there's a big movement in many states. I was just in Minnesota, and where I lived for 17 years before I moved up here,
Right.
And I think they're probably going to legalize. I mean, they already have basically legalized cannabis. I think in a couple of years, they're going to legalize psychedelics, at least psilocybin and probably MDMA for, small amounts, personal use. But then also there's there's a medical community there that's really into the therapeutic applications. There are few research programs going on at the University of Minnesota. So I think it's going to emerge, as a center for research as well. And if Missouri is coming along. Of course, Colorado and Oregon are all kind of out front.
Right.
And in Canada, in British Columbia, it's there's a lot of startup companies here that are working with psychedelics, and there's it's basically legal to have small amounts of pretty much anything. And there are even stores, that openly advertise, DMT, mushrooms,
I'll be darned.
All kinds of things like that. I mean, not necessarily, I mean, that could be problematic in a certain way. I'm not one of these people that say, we should just
Open the floodgates.
dispense these things out of vending machines. I don't think so. I think it takes a certain amount of, uh, information to use them properly.
I agree.
That's where the whole educational component comes in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I've got so many questions, but we're kind of tight for time, and I'm going to skip a couple. I don't want to talk about the pharmaceutical industry. I don't want to talk about kind of downer stuff, because they're always going to be there. They're always going to be something that you have to deal with. But like you just mentioned DMT, and one of the things that's happened over the years, since you and I have been talking publicly, for a long time, there was a big question. I know you know this, maybe the audience doesn't, about whether DMT was something that actually was biosynthesized in the human body, or whether it was just a metabolite or something like that. And it turns out over the last 10 years or so, there's lots of evidence to show that it actually is biosynthesized. And that was such huge news, and I was so thrilled when that news came out. And I remember emailing back and forth with you, and we were just like, "Oh, but again, it's just one of those things that over time ends up in the journals, but not much, not much, in the public sphere. But could you just maybe talk a little bit about, has there been any advancement in the understanding of DMT as something that occurs in natural operating human brain chemistry? And we could talk a lot about that, but
yes.
Back in the day, we used to talk about evolutionary implications, and I don't do these things very often anymore, but when I do, I still come out of it thinking, God dang, what the hell is going on here?
Right. Well, yes. I mean, since we've talked, or over the last 10 years or so, there is new information. There's no doubt that DMT is synthesized in the body at different times and in different places. Previously, there was a lot of kind of focus on the pineal gland, and Rick Strassman talked about the pineal gland, which in myth and in legend and sort of Eastern traditions and so on, that's the third eye, and it does have the structure of an eye. It is a photoreceptor, and it responds to light, and the main hormone in the pineal gland is melatonin, which regulates our sleep-wake cycles and all that. But DMT does occur in the pineal, and Rick Strassman's work speculated that maybe that was the main locus, and that it had effects on, say, the near-death experience, and under situations of high stress like birth and death, maybe the pineal gland pumped out lots of DMT and induced an altered state. It appears that really doesn't hold up, primarily because the pineal doesn't produce enough DMT to actually trigger a psychedelic experience. You have to get to a certain level endogenously.
Because it doesn't take much.
Well, that doesn't take much when you're smoking it, but in the brain, you have to think about the levels that are there at the receptor. And Dave Nichols, another famous person who you know about, has really kind of dumped on this idea that the pineal. But the good news is that we're finding actually DMT is not just in the pineal, it's all over the brain. And it's a neurotransmitter, just like serotonin and dopamine and these other things.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the same level in different parts of the brain.
Remarkable.
The evidence to support that is solid. I'd like to plug. There's a researcher, an amateur, and one of these guys that is, I wouldn't call him an amateur. He's a self-taught neuroscientist.
Okay.
His name is John Chavez, and he has written a couple of books. His first one is called Questions for the Lion Tamer. Don't ask me why.
Okay.
But he's looked very deeply at this question of the endogenous DMT, and he's worked. There's actually a group at Michigan, University of Michigan, who's looked into this pretty deeply, and they now finally have some support for this research. And I believe one of them, I forget the gentleman's name, the investigator. He is a true neuroscientist, and I think he went to either UCSF or maybe UCSD, one of the new psychedelic research centers. So he's able to pursue this. The remarkable thing, in some ways, is that the funding priorities are, in a lot of ways, don't make sense. I mean, if DMT is all over the brain, and it's as functionality is as important as serotonin and dopamine and these other biogenic amines, you'd think there'd be a lot of money poured into that research, but not so much.
We've seen that over and over again for how many years, and it doesn't surprise me now. I'm sure it doesn't surprise you anymore either.
I guess not, but finally, it is being looked at, and it's being looked into more systematically. So I expect great results are going to come out of that.
Right.
That's a great thing. John's website is called DMT Quest. It's called dmtquest.org or .com. People should take a look at that. It's quite interesting, and that will lead people into the current sort of state of the art with DMT.
Okay, that's great. That's great news. Since we're talking about websites, let's talk about McKenna.academy. All right.
Yeah.
This is Dennis's current project. When was the McKenna Academy established? And the full name, the McKenna Academy of Natural Philosophy. Actually, can you tell us a little bit about the background of this?
Sure. Well, it went through a couple of iterations. When I moved to Canada in 2019, I incorporated it here in Canada. But then I had me and the founders decided it made more sense to make it a U.S. based organization. So we dissolved the Canadian one, and we created it again in 2020 as a U.S.-based, registered in California as a 501c3 nonprofit. So, we have that status now, and that's the platform we operate out of. And people can look at the website. It's McKenna.academy. That's it. Academy is instead of .com, it's
right.
Academy. And it's a lovely website. We have some great creative folks.
It's a bunch of really cool people that are involved there. I've been
you've looked at it.
I've looked at it, and I have to say, I wanted to talk about the Brain Forest Cafe. And,
great!
And your new podcast. I've listened to the first two episodes. I haven't. There's a third one, I think, but I haven't heard that one. But it was Shaheen. I forget his last name, but and Jonathan Liu. Is that right? Who was in the maybe that was the second one or the first one. But anyway, they were fantastic. They were talking about beta carbolines, and I was going to ask you about some of these other more exotic hallucinogens. We really didn't get there, and I'm not sure that we have time. But anyway, that was a fascinating talk that you had with those guys.
Yeah, you mean the folks talking about the Zoroastrian stuff?
Yeah, all the crazy.
Yeah, Shaheen he lives in Vancouver. Those guys are doing some very interesting work. Like particularly with the beta carbolines. It's like we think of the beta carbolines as these alkaloids that are MAO inhibitors. They potentiate DMT and ayahuasca.
Right, right.
Beta carbolines have a complex pharmacology on their own, and they are looking into this. So if anyone that's familiar with the magazine, which comes out, I think maybe quarterly, called Double Blind, there's a feature article about their work in the latest Double Blind magazine. So that's worth taking a look at.
Yeah. So anyway, those guys are cool, and you interviewed Graham Hancock, who's amazing, and anyway, it's
we've
great.
got a number in the pipeline. We've got some. We're not very fast about it. We're dropping maybe one podcast about every month or so, but they're coming, and we did some, and we got more on the way. So it's going to be, and it's fun. It's become one of the best things I most enjoy about the Academy. I didn't realize when I founded this nonprofit there was going to be so damn much administrative stuff and legal and all that stuff, which needs to happen. But it's like it's distracting me from what I want to do, But it has to happen.
Right.
So we've got the Brain Forest Academy, and then we did. If you're looking for information about exotic, undiscovered hallucinogens or psychedelics, look at ESPD. We did ESPD 55 last year in the UK, and before that in 2017, as you probably know, we did ESPD 50.
Yeah. And you can look at those on the site there at McKenna.academy.
Those are all on the site. Yeah, if you go to the main page, you see the podcast listed, but then I think you have
to that corner. There's a little button there, and it'll pull down menu, and yeah. Well, it's fantastic.
All of those talks are there. They're recorded and they're open access. Which is part of our mission, is to not prevent people, not put paywalls in front of this information.
Absolutely.
I mean, you have to register. We will steal your email, but we won't steal your money. And you can look at there's hours and hours of these presentations, and they're pretty cool.
Yeah,
I mean, really good stuff.
There's some gems. There's some gems in there for sure.
Yeah.
So, hey, Dennis, we would be remiss if we didn't take a minute to quickly mention the passing of Roland Griffiths. Just this last Monday, and he's a colleague of yours and a friend, I'm sure, and just an amazing researcher, super courageous guy. I spoke with him years ago on the radio show, just like I had with all you guys, and I was brokenhearted when I heard that. But I just wanted to say what an awesome guy he was.
He was incredible. Yeah, he was. I mean, he was everything. He was a stellar human being. He was a wonderful man. I was privileged to be able to spend time with him because he was on the Hefter Research Institute. We were on the board together. And, he was an example, is an example of the kind of people that should be investigating psychedelics. I mean, he was not only a great scientist, but he was a great human being, and he had the right idea. Absolutely. He didn't need psychedelics. I mean, he did, of course, he knew what the experience was. He did not, I mean, people that are familiar with him know that he, one of his pioneering things was that he, worked with patients who were dying, who were anxious about death, and through psilocybin therapy, they were able to come to terms with that. Roland didn't need that, or maybe he did, but I don't know if he took advantage of it. I don't think he did. I think, for one thing, he'd been a meditator all his life, and he he kind of appreciated the cosmic aspects of life and death, and but just yeah, our whole community is just, we
Yeah,
knew it was coming,
yeah,
but
he's been sick
we're
for a while.
grieving,
Yeah,
I mean, we're grieving, we're all grieving.
I
uh
understand. Well, he was a wonderful man, and for folks out there in the audience, if you're not familiar with Ron Griffiths, check him out. And he's a name that you should remember. And speaking of that, it's been almost a year since Stephen Buhner uh, uh, passed over on the other side, and he's another one, just remarkable person and a great. Just an amazing man, an incredible herbalist. Talk about a medicine man. I mean, a real healer, and a great beer brewer too. He. So I miss Stephen. I know you do too. And for people out there, once again, Stephen Herod Buhner, check out his work. He was amazing, and a bunch of great stuff out there from Steve.
I think I'm trying to recollect, but I think that in some presentation I saw a year or so ago, Stan Groff, who is another one that
Yeah, yeah.
probably is not going to be with us too much longer, but he remarked that what brings credibility to the new psychedelic scientific renaissance is the character of the people that are doing it. And I think he had Roland in mind when he said that.
Or Stephen.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. All right. Well, it's crazy. All those old radio shows that we did, that one. I don't know if you remember, but there's one with you and Steven and I, and it is just it's fantastic information, but it's actually really really funny. And those, in hindsight now, I'm so glad we did those, and they're out there percolating around the web, and the information is still relevant. And sometimes you don't realize it, but there's thousands and thousands of downloads and listens to those old shows now. And so I'm so thrilled that we did it, and Roland was a part of it, and Stephen, and everybody else. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, the power of social media, as it's a two-edged sword, and it's screwed up in a lot of ways, but you can use it as a platform to get the word out, and I think it's very effective that way. So in part because of that, more and more people know about psychedelics and know that these are not bad things. These can be used for great good and healing. I think in conversations we've had, Mike, we've talked about this. I mean, I used to say, I'm fond of saying, there's no such thing as a bad drug. There's plenty of bad ways to use drugs, but there's plenty of good ways to use them too. And the drugs just have the properties that they have. And the moral aspect comes in the choices we make in terms of how to use them.
The wisdom to use it. Yeah.
And that's true of any technology, really.
Exactly right.
But yeah.
All right. Well, Dennis, let's wrap it up here. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add for these conference attendees before we say adios? All right. Well, that's not exactly the way I wanted to end that conversation, but I lost my connection to Dennis. It does not look like I'm getting it back. So I'm going to call that a wrap. Once again, thank you big time to Psychedelic Missouri, all the folks who make these events happen. Thanks to all of you participating in the conferences and supporting these efforts. We're at it again next week in Kansas City, so please tell others about it on the web, psychedelicmissouri.com. Huge thanks to the wonderful Dr. Dennis Mckenna. Amazing work you can check out at mckenna.academy, including an exciting new podcast project. Dennis, you're the greatest. Thank you. So good to catch up. My name is Mike Hagan, Mikehagan on the web, mikehagan.com. One more thank you to KOPN 89.5 FM in Columbia, Missouri, providing a platform for me to do outrageous radio for a long time. So thank you all. Cheers. We'll catch you on the flip side.